Hi, it's Annalie. Today I am going to do something a little bit different. I am going to paint bubbles. So I have here some photo paper. I do also have watercolor paper, which we'll try next. I have an assortment of liquid food coloring. This is very cheap. I got from Amazon. And then I also have watercolors, liquid watercolors from Altenew. So I'm going to start today with the food coloring on the glossy paper. And I have a straw ready. And I have a paintbrush ready. And I have already chosen a number of colors of the food coloring, which I just put into my little palette. So I'm going to add a little bit more dish soap to my water, just to make sure it's nice and soapy. And I'm just going to stir it up. Then I also have some fresh water to clean off my paintbrush with. So I'm going to stir this up to get it nice and foamy. And then I have the shiny side up. I'm just going to blow right into the water. Actually, I'm going to do it down here and let the bubbles just fall over the edge. Now I'm going to use a damp paintbrush, and I'm just going to grab a little bit, excuse me, of my food coloring, and I'm just going to drop it onto the bubbles. So I'm touching the bubbles very, very gently. And then this is a lot of color in this tiny little bit of these food coloring. So you just need a little bit, and you just paint the bubbles. I'm using a number of colors. And then I will set it on a flat surface to dry. Now I'm going to do the same thing with here. I'm going to see if maybe I can get some smaller bubbles. I think to make the smaller bubbles, you just really need to stir it a lot more. And then gently blow, just to get them to rise to the top of your jar, and then push them so that there's small bubbles. You can do all different sizes. You don't want a huge mound of the small bubbles because it does take a lot longer for them to dry. So kind of spread them out a little bit. I like the combination of small and large bubbles. This one we're going to do purple, some blues, some pinks. So you want to get down low to the paper and get the bottom edges of the bubbles as well as the top. So the reason I do this is it just adds a really cool texture to your background. And you can either have it as your background, or you can cut these into different shapes. You can use them for flowers. Yesterday I did some, I used a pink and purple, and I cut a lot of little butterflies. So, you know, once it's dry, you look at it and say, I wonder what it could be used for. I've done one that was mostly blues, and it was a really great background for a fish card. So that was fun. Now I'm going to set this one aside again on a flat surface. And it's fun to just try out different color combinations, different techniques, using smaller bubbles, using bigger bubbles. Just however you feel like doing it. Also metallic paints, if you have some metallic paints to add in, that's really beautiful. I didn't happen to get any out today. But if you have metallic paint, that's fun to add. So now the goal is for it to dry like this so that you see the outline of the bubbles. But on the shiny paper, sometimes it slides a little bit, and of course when it slides, the colors blend together. But when it dries, you can generally see the outlines, or at least some sort of pattern. I'm gonna bring this one back in, and I'm gonna add some more on the edges, just because we don't want to waste our whole panel here. Of course, cutting, using your die cutting machine and cutting the, sorry, I've got such a tickle in my throat. Cutting the photo paper it doesn't usually cut through completely, but I just go in with my scissors and finish the job. So we have those done. Now, I'm gonna do the same thing on the watercolor paper. I have tried taping this down, and it hasn't worked for me because the water was getting right underneath the tape. So I'm doing it right on here, but it does warp a lot. So I'm doing this just to show you how different they look on the watercolor paper versus the photo paper. It's fun painting bubbles though. I'm sure you haven't done this in a while. So I think I'm going to just kind of bend up the edges so that it doesn't roll off the edge. And then just keep trying to maneuver it down. Hopefully I will come up with a better solution to keep the paper from warping. So you definitely want to try to get some of these little bubbles because those are definitely fun when they dry. So there we have that. I'm gonna bring this one back in and I'm gonna show you my next step. I'm gonna take some of these bubbles because they've pretty much deflated, but I'm just gonna take some with my spatula and I'm just gonna pick them up and move them to a different part. I'm trying not to move the paint that's already on the paper, just the bubbles. This is just a step that you can play with if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. I'm just doing it to spread it around, share the love, cover up my whole paper. So right now, this is what we have going on. By moving the little bubbles, it creates more texture. They're so fun. And you never know what you're going to get, which is kind of fun. If you're a perfectionist and need to know exactly what the outcome is going to be, this might not be the technique for you, but it's just a fun way to play. You know, if you have a day that you're just not feeling that creative, but your favorite space is your craft room, just like mine, you know, it gives you something to do without feeling like you have to be completely creative and productive. So it's just a fun activity. I'm going to show you the difference. See, this really shows a lot of the pattern. This one, it still has bubbles on it, but because of the warping, they pretty much all melded together. But it's, you know, it's still fun to play with the bubbles, but you could do this anyway. And it looks pretty much the same with the watercolors. So let's do one with watercolors. You know what I'm gonna do? Ultramarine, and I'm gonna do mango, just to get some different colors going in there. Sometimes it's easier just to let it run right over the edge of the jar. I'm going to start with some mango. And I'm going to grab a little bit of the ultramarine. And we'll have some yellow and blue and some green. So I would love it to just stop right there because that looks super cool. But of course it will shift a little bit on the paper while it melts. Well, it doesn't melt while it dries. So this one is with the watercolor, where the other one was food coloring. And now they're really starting to pop. But such a fun little technique. I love these greens together. These are pretty. So you can play as much or as little as you want. This looks like the back of a turtle. An underwater scene. Flowers, could be anything. So now I'm just dabbing them to get any extra bubbles off. And then because it's photo paper, it does, you know, like you get prints or whatever on there. So I do, once it's dry, just buff it just to get rid of any other marks so that it's nice and shiny. But you see all the pattern on here, from the big bubbles, from the little tiny bubbles. So it's just pretty cool to be able to come up with different ways to use these. So I'm gonna do this one. I love this one. Scrape a little bit first. And then I'll just pat it. Just like with your inks, I think if you're gonna do this, you would start with the lighter colors first, just to be sure that nothing comes off from your cloth onto your next one. Ooh, I love this one. I have an idea for this one already. I think that's really pretty. These colors are really pretty together. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. You could always cut it down into a panel and have it as a background. You could cut words out of it, flowers. Yesterday I used some vases and I cut vases out. Those were pretty. I'll show you all those in the end. It's so much different design and texture on these, so it's a lot of fun. And then the other thing I want to show you is the difference between this and the watercolor paper. The watercolor paper definitely mutes the colors. I think, here, we'll compare the colors that were pretty much the same. So this is done on the photo paper, this is done on the watercolor paper. This one, I do have a little tiny bit of texture here where there were tiny little bubbles, but the rest of it, I think because of the warping, kind of just melded in together. But this one, you can see, whoops, sorry. You can see all the different little bubbles and textures, and so cool. This would be great. I know Spellbinders has a dancing octopus die. This could be so cute for the little tentacles, jellyfish, you know, whatever you want, however, whatever your brain decides. I did cut out one flower from the Craft a Flower Cape Marguerite layering die set from Altenew. I was thinking I would probably use that on here. And I think what I will also do is cut the center from the bubbles and have the center here. So I'm just gonna play with that for a little while and I will show you what I come up with. Okay, so I spent the day yesterday and today playing with some of these backgrounds that we made, and I will show you what I have done. So this one I think is very pretty. I love the greens and the blues. I think I put it away. This is an Altenew flower. I don't remember the name. And I also used the frame that I know is from the Ornate Nesting die set. And I just used 2 frames and I cut them out together and then stacked that. And then I did make the mistake of heat embossing the sentiment, which I probably should not have done because I really don't think that the photo paper is heat proof. So it did make it warp. I tried to do it very slowly, but there's still a little warpage. So I don't recommend heat embossing on the photo paper. And then I have the blue and yellow one, which I absolutely loved. I think it was so pretty. And I did cut the center of this. I actually cut the center of this also from the green, but I just think that that makes a pretty center of the flower. And then I made a bird. This is the Bird of the Mountain die set. And I think it's so pretty. I mean, it might be a little bit overdone. I could have used some plain layers in there, but it was just fun. It was just fun. It makes a pretty card. This one, not my favorite, but I was just trying to figure out what to do with the remaining pieces. So I just cut them into strips and popped them up on foam tape, added some flowers and a sentiment. These are from yesterday's papers. I cut out a bunch of butterflies, which I think I showed you before. I used the medium ones on here. I used the large one on here. And then I also used the outline, the negative part from where I cut the butterflies, and I used that as a stencil. So this one still needs a sentiment, a little bit more decorating, but there's one. This one was from watercolor paper that I used. Here it is. And I cut out the rose and I just added it to an old background. These are flowers that I cut from one of the purple ones that I made yesterday. They're so pretty. There's so many details in there. Don't love the background, but I do love the flowers. They look almost porcelain. This one I made the vases, and I actually had 2 other vases, which I did run through my embossing folder. So you can see the texture from the embossing folder. So running the photo paper through embossing folder will work and add extra dimension, but I liked the design on these, so I didn't want to risk it. And then I just added it to an embossed wood grain folder and a background that I had previously made. This one I also cut from the watercolor paper. I had made this one yesterday. I think that came out really pretty. Here's one that I made with fish. This one I used a green background. Before I have made it with a blue background with smaller little bubbles, and it looked really pretty cool, but I think this is still pretty cool. And I just added some clear Nuvo drops. I spread them out to make the fish look like they're wet. Added a couple little bubbles. This came out pretty. I like this one. This one I used watercolor paper, cut out the roses. Again, I used the wood grain embossing folder and then just some leaves that I had left over in my stash. And then I also have this one that I made from today's work. Clearly I haven't made it into a card yet, but I used the green leftover scraps and I used some of the pink leftover scraps. So I'll have to design this somehow. And then I like to do this with my paper. I just weave it into a couple strips. So this one also is a work in progress. I'll have to add something. I'm not sure yet what, but I'll add something on there, probably not that, and make that into a card at some time too. So I would love to know if you have a favorite card, if any of these speak to you, and I'd really like to see what you make. So this is a lot of cards from just a few little pieces of bubble paper, but they were really fun to make. So I hope you join me again. I had a great time, and I hope you did too. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.